Hey there folks, welcome to Spectrum Pulse. We talk about music, movies, art and culture, and this is Billboard Breakdown. Well, folks, it finally happened. 14 weeks into its run, just a scant few weeks from breaking a record held for nearly 20 years, it was unseated by a dark horse soundtrack kit from a subpar rapper and a YouTuber that really nobody could have predicted. Yeah, the rest of this week actually did happen and gave me a fair amount to really talk about, but in a rare occurrence for this show, it actually looks like our top 10 might be more interesting. Because folks, this week, Uptown Funk by Mark Ronson and Bruno Mars lost the #1 slot. So let's talk about that major shift, shall we? Our new #1 is See You Again by Wiz Khalifa featuring Charlie Puth, and in retrospect, I shouldn't be as surprised as I kinda am that it got this big. I mean, Wiz Khalifa's been to the top before, he's riding the wave of Furious 7's tremendous success. Let It Go from the Frozen soundtrack last year proved that soundtrack hits do have viability again, and Paul Walker's tragic death gave the song some real emotive presence and poignance. It's basically this year's version of Candle in the Wind 1997 by Elton John, and the fact that like that track, it happens to be pretty damn good, does help matters. But unlike that song, there's an open question about how long it will really last. This week it rode monstrous sales and huge streaming to the top, buoyed by a very strong YouTube presence, but how long that will actually last becomes the big question. I mean, those sort of sales bursts, they rarely hold up for multiple weeks, and the question of whether or not airplay can really keep up becomes pretty big. Because let's face facts here, Uptown Funk still has a ton of airplay, and unlike most longtime hits, it's not dropping away as quickly as some people expected. Sure, it's no longer dominant in streaming, but it still has that top YouTube slot. If See You Again slips, and I'd argue it might, Uptown Funk has a shot at going back to #1 and still challenging that record. Yeah, it being non-consecutive, and certain purists will take issue with this, Mariah Carey fans, but I'd argue, still relevant to the conversation. That is, of course, if Uptown Funk can stop any competition from slipping in. I mean, we got Sugar by Maroon 5. It seems the first obvious contender by its sales and airplay position, holding on to #3, but it seems like airplay has finally stalled out, and it slipped in streaming on YouTube this week. Next up is a more serious contender with Trap Queen by Fetty Wap rising again to #4, sure as hell higher than I ever would have expected for that song, with stronger sales and still huge streaming, but it doesn't have a lot of YouTube, and even with slow gains in airplay, would it be enough to unseat it? Now we got Thinking Out Loud by Ed Sheeran #5. Okay, that's out of the question at this point. It's losing in all categories except for decent streaming numbers, but I don't see a recovery here. Well, okay, what about Earned It by The Weeknd at #6, which is somehow still gaining a ton of airplay? But the sales numbers are not as impressive, and streaming looks pretty shaky as well. Then you got Love Me Like You Do by Ellie Goulding, which would have been a contender, but it did not have a good week at all, with radio slowing, dips in streaming, and surprisingly weak sales. It might have actually hit its peak and might be going downhill again. So okay, what about GDFR by Flo Rida, Sage the Gemini, and Look Oz at #8? Well, I'm honestly a little bit unsure about this one. Good sales and airplay, sure, but streaming is shaky, and lack of real YouTube might not give enough of a push to really make it to the top. Now on to the contender that I want to see make it, probably won't, but it's our new arrival to the top 10 at #9, Shut Up and Dance by Walk the Moon. Yeah, we finally have an indie rock song in the top 10 again, and yes, it's awesome. It's also surprisingly healthy across the board. Strong sales, good gains in airplay, and even started to pick up some streaming. Yeah, it's not doing much of anything on YouTube, but I can hold out some degree of hope. Don't take that away from me. The last on our list is Style by Taylor Swift, which is holding on to #10 pretty much thanks to airplay and nothing else. I can see it dropping away fairly soon. Now, moving away from all of that craziness and excitement, let's move on to the exact opposite, our losers and dropouts. The latter category, pretty much all tracks that were on their way out anyway. Apparently by J. Cole, I See You by Luke Bryan, I Bet My Life by Imagine Dragons, She Knows by Neo and Juicy J, Night Changes by One Direction, Animals by Maroon 5, and most pleasingly of all, Coco by OT Genasis. Doesn't exactly help me much in the long run. I mean, Coco still lasted long enough on the charts to likely land on the year-end list, but at least I'm not bothering with it now. I'm not seeing it. And a nice change of pace, we didn't get a lot of big losers this week either. I mean, we got Homegrown Honey by Darius Rucker dropping to 81, which is honestly kind of odd considering his album just dropped. I guess everybody else ignored it as hard as I did. And then we had Lonely Eyes by Chris Young. Both of these songs are losing steam naturally, not surprising. And then there's Outside by Calvin Harris featuring Ellie Goulding. And actually kind of liking that song, one of Calvin Harris's best. It's a little bit frustrating to see it slip to 46. Then again, it's oscillated all around the charts during its run, so I've got no idea where it's gonna land when and if it eventually drops out. But where the majority of the action was this week was in our gains, most of which were simply following the path of previous boosts they already had. Dear Future Husband by Meghan Trainor is continuing its regrettable rise to #26, thankfully balanced out though by Honey I'm Good by Andy Grammer, maintaining its steady boost to #34. Seems to be a bit of a retro theme going on, and honestly Andy Grammer's doing it better. In particular, electronic music did have strong gains this week on the other hand. Where Are You Now by Skrillex, Diplo, and Justin Bieber rose to 42 for no adequately explained reason. Get Low by Dylan Francis and DJ Snake rose to 61 off of its debut last week, probably getting a nice boost coming off of the Furious 7. And You Know You Like It by DJ Snake and Aluna George continued its rise to 67. Hell, even Hey Mama by David Guetta, Nicki Minaj, and Afrojack rose up to 44. Outside of that, well, Kanye West All Day with Theophilus London, Alan Kingdom, and Paul McCartney went up to 52. Probably will gain even more with that Kendrick Lamar remix floating around. Then you had Bright by Echo Smith. They got a modest boost to number 76. And for some ungodly reason, Commas by Future went up to 79. Because apparently all our charts needed was more badly written and generically made hip-hop tracks that do nothing all that new or special. So, you want proof of that? Let's take a look at our one returning entry, shall we?
I feel like the sky is falling down. Ain't nobody here to play around. Push it to the edge, I won't back down. Cause it's time to go hard or go home. One way up, no way out. I give it all for the family.
Look, folks, the only reason this song is here is because of Furious 7, and it's still a painfully generic retread of We Own It, swapping out 2 Chainz for Iggy Azalea and Potent Energy for a terrible burbling synth line that nobody wanted. In this case, if clarification is required, that's not an upgrade. Gah. Well, that was quick. Might as well get on to our new entries, where we thankfully get another reasonably sized list. Starting off with number 100, Lean On by Major Lazer and DJ Snake featuring Mia. So DJ Snake's massive push continues with another collaboration notching the charts, this time with producer Major Lazer and Danish electro-pop singer Mia. I'm sorry, I looked up the pronunciation, I'm still not sure what that is. And I can't exactly say that I'm a fan of the song either. Now don't get me wrong, the deep low synths defining the background, the snaps is fine, reminds me of some decent deep house, but that synth line just grates on my nerves, and the pitch shifting does not help matters. Now the real problem comes with our singer though. I mean, I first became familiar with her collaboration with Iggy Azalea on Beg For It, and she really does come across as a poor man's Charlie XCX on this song, as her voice is a fair bit thinner and shakier, with the pitch correction on the edges only highlighting that fact. It's not a terrible track, don't get me wrong, and there's far worse that dropped this week. We'll get to it, but it's not something that I'd ever actively skip out, and honestly, I'd probably skip it. Number 99, Be My Love Song by Easton Corbin.
Be my all night long, be the buzz in my Dixie cup. Steady rocking till the sun comes up. You know I really love to watch you dance. Baby, be my oh hell yeah. I feel a little sing along coming on. Baby, be my love song.
So as I mentioned in the past, there are certain country artists that just fell through the cracks of my general knowledge when I drifted away from the genre in the mid to late 2000s. And Easton Corbin dropping his debut record in 2009, he was one of those guys. He's also never really been a huge artist either. I mean, I recognize his name through looking through the old charts, but thanks to his neo-traditional focus and his really odd single release schedule, with the previous single for this upcoming album in June being released way back in January of 2014, I wasn't all that familiar with the guy. And after this song, well, I still don't have a lot to say. I mean, he's got a good voice and a generally agreeable sound. The list of country artists that play in a very similar adult contemporary brand of country music, that list is only getting longer. And even despite that wheedling guitar solo, there isn't really enough here to make Easton all that distinctive. Now don't get me wrong, the songwriting is pretty good, but if we're looking at a guy who's playing very much in the lane that Tim McGraw made and Chris Young deepened, and Easton Corbin, he'd fit that bill. Honestly, give the sun to Tim McGraw or Chris Young, what changes? Now, I admit it, the song has good enough pedigree, I like the sound, and it's a good enough love song for what it is, but it just doesn't leave a lot of an impression on me. Sorry. Number 98, Goodbye by Who Is Fancy. So one of the odd things that has happened with YouTube over the past couple of years is the rising prevalence of talk show hosts getting their own YouTube channels, which overall I don't mind as long as they aren't getting promoted over similarly ranked talent. Besides, PewDiePie's gonna be bigger than all of them anyways. And hell, I'd almost applaud Jimmy Fallon, Jimmy Kimmel, Ellen, and John Oliver of really getting a grip on how they can really leverage YouTube to reach a younger audience and inform and be entertaining. What I've started to see though is that the typical musical performances on these shows, they are now gaining a little bit of traction via some YouTube crossover, which leads us to Who Is Fancy, the bizarrely named young singer-songwriter co-signed by Scooter Braun and Scott Borchetta and got recognition thanks to a performance on Jimmy Fallon. And I gotta admit, I'm conflicted about this song. On the one hand, it's very percussion heavy and does feel like it's trying to snag a middle ground between Sam Smith and Ed Sheeran, especially with the organ and the strings to simmer in the background. But honestly, that's not a bad thing. I do kind of like it. And hell, even the melancholic lyrics fit the mold for our singer-songwriter here, judging that particular breakup. He's handling it maturely. I can dig that. But as a singer myself, I'm not seeing a lot of unique, distinctive personality with this guy. And his voice, well, it sounds as if he's singing through his nose, and that doesn't exactly do a lot for me. I mean, the song's fine, I guess, but nothing that I'd say is all that special. Number 96, Crash and Burn, and by Thomas Rhett. Okay folks, you know I've mentioned over the past few weeks that country radio is struggling right now for material given its slump, going for deeper cuts in desperation to fill the bro country bubble with something that might appeal to my generation? Well, it looks as though they finally hit the bottom of that barrel and we got a new single from Thomas Rhett. There might be worse bro country artists working today with, let's say, Cole Swindle and Chase Rice, but I don't think there's one that I respect less than Thomas Rhett, who owes his entire musical career to his father, Rhett Atkins, who has been churning out material that varies between forgettable and atrocious, hence the appropriately titled Crash and Burn, the first single from his upcoming record, and like Sam Hunt ahead of him, it belongs nowhere near country radio. For one, is much more in common with the vintage blues doo-wop with the whistles and the shouts and the rollicking guitar than anything sort of country, falling very much in the vein of, say, Meghan Trainor and trying to fuse retro trends with modern ones, and for the most part completely falling flat in his face. In this case, Thomas Rhett skipped over the actual composition, which of course he didn't write, and outright appropriated the melody line of Sam Cooke's Chain Gang without giving due credit. And I'm sorry, I've got an issue with that. And for good measure, the presentation completely falls flat on his face too, with Thomas Rhett's lazy drawl completely failing to add any sort of drama to the fact that his relationship just ended and, hey, he should look on the bright side. What's telling here is the lyric, I let another love crash and burn, which means one of two things. He either got dumped thanks to his own laziness, he let it happen, and he clearly doesn't seem to care all that much given his delivery and the upright tone of the song, or he dumped her and is trying to let her down easy by saying that he's hurting too much inside, which screams of insincerity given his delivery. Either way, between the terrible writing, lazy delivery, and outright theft, this song can remove itself from country radio at any time because it sure as hell doesn't belong there. Next, number 82, Tear in My Heart by 21 Pilots.
She's the tear in my heart. I'm on fire. She's the tear in my heart. Take me higher than I've ever been. The songs on the radio are okay, but my taste in music is your face.
Now, when I covered 21 Pilots a couple weeks back on the week where Kendrick Lamar debuted with all those songs, I missed a lot of those, actually managed to impress me by stepping into a darker, nastier sound that showed the group improving by leaps and bounds in their writing and composition. Tear in My Heart shows much of the very same advancement, but it's much closer to the band's typical sound coming off of Vessel, with a blend of keyboards and drums bringing together a much broader and vibrant sound. And honestly, it's awesome, I really liked it. Powerfully melodic with its pretty basic but effective hook, impressively earnest, the synth backdrop adding a lot of real swell to it, a well-executed tempo shift, and for a pretty simple love song, it's got the sort of balance between memorable details and the sort of pop rock power that makes a damn effective track. Dear God, after Crash and Burn, I needed a song like this, and it's gotten me all the more excited for 21 Pilots' next album, so yeah, definitely recommended. Check this out. And finally, number 70, Ride Out with Kid Ink, Tyga, Wale, YG, and Rich Homie Quan.
Forever, we ride out together. Pull up right in your zone. Take over the street, that's how we roll. And we gon' ride on forever. We ride out together.
You know, I'm always always a little bit surprised when a posse cut lands on the radio, especially when the rappers aren't from the same posse or label and aren't giving DJ Khaled another hit, and especially when the posse cut is less than 4 minutes long. In this case, the song's arrival is much easier to explain why it's here. It's yet another song from the soundtrack of Furious 7. And considering I only really liked maybe 1.5 rappers on this song, I did not expect it to be good. And honestly, it actually is pretty good. A lot of this comes down to them focusing on their strengths as a group. Kid Ink is given the hook, Wale, Tyga, and YG get verses, and Rich Homie Quan gets an intro that nobody will care about, so that's okay too. From there though, the synths are anchored to a pretty solid bass line, the melody is pretty striking with a good hook. As for verses, honestly, all three of them do a good job, but I'm probably gonna give the edge to Tyga here for actually bringing a pretty solid flow, better than anything he did with that Chris Brown album. Content here, nothing all that interesting to be fair. A lot of macho swagger and brotherhood imagery, with only YG adding anything close to visceral on it. But you know what, for this sort of soundtrack hit, given the amount of time they had with this song, I'd say it works. Good song. So yeah, up until those last two, this week was not all that great whatsoever. Worst by a mile is Crash and Burn by Thomas Rhett. Seriously, screw that song. With dishonorable mention going to the Major Lazer, DJ Snake, and Mia collaboration Lean On. As for the best, pretty easy here. The posse cut Ride Out gets the honorable mention pretty easily here, with Tear in My Heart snagging that top slot. It's gonna be interesting in the coming weeks with the Furious 7 songs eventually exiting the charts. Not all of them, I see you again sticking around for a while, but I do think it's gonna be fun going forward. But until then, I'm Mark, you're watching Billboard Breakdown on Spectrum Pulse, and I'll see you next time.